Hey there, it's Ara, and this is going to be the Sun episode. I can't wait for you to listen to it, to hear each and every one of these episodes. Rachel Ruth Tate and I had such a blast recording each of these. But at the top of the episode, before it even starts, I wanted to just pose a question. And that would be, for you to listen to this episode about the sun, understand its relationship, to life on Earth and, of course, in natal charts and things like this. But where does the sun show up in daily life? That may seem like a really obvious question, but one of the premises of this podcast series is, of course, bringing the material back to the house, bringing the material back to the largest self-expression of the self, which is beyond the self would be, the living environment of the person. And so where does the sun show up in daily life? So I just posed that question and, after the episode is over, stick around after the bell and I'll tell you my thoughts on the answer to that question or my observations with that prompt. So enjoy this episode about the sun. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Ara. And the Living Mandala of the Planets series continues. Actually, I guess it's sort of kicking off at this point. I'm joined by Rachel Ruth Tate, astrologer, local astrologer here. We share the same teacher, Austin Coppock. And we're just going to kick it off with the sun. This episode is going to be all about the sun. The sun is, of course, the star at the center of our solar system. We see it every darn day. It's what we orbit around on planet Earth. It's that which all the other planets revolve around. It gives us heat. It gives us light. It's the star of the sky. It's the big player. It's the sun. And of course, in classical Greek mythology, the sun was represented by the Titans, Hyperion, and Helios. Roman Sol and later Apollo, the god of light. The sun is a player in every culture on the planet. It's inescapable. It is the center of life as we know it. And so I'm eager to hear Rachel talk to us about the sun as a life force.
The sun is all of the energy that allows us to exist in the solar system, right? It illuminates, literally its energy is that which allows all of the rest of the creation to be witnessed. We can see it. We've got light, we've got energy, we've got heat. That's how we power everything within the solar system. And in astrology, the sun is the most obvious body in the sky. It's quite shiny. Whenever planets are close to it, it literally outshines them. They can't even be seen. And that's why it is so evident and obvious, and at times a lot of our lives, at times our day, at times our year. And the sign that the sun is in is what creates the most evident and obvious change, seasonality, right? We see the sun being expressed in the winter differently than it's expressed in the summer. And most of astrology is actually hung across those solstices, right? The time when the sun most light, least light, and the equinoxes when things are really equivalent and the sun grows or waxes in light. And then at the other end in autumn, it wanes. And so in astrology, at times, the personality of the life that exists either in the natal chart or the personality of time, right, itself. And so I love the sun as being the primary luminary for most of us. We know our sun sign, right? We know our birthday. But sun sign astrology has kind of outshone other forms of astrology. If you were born in the evening, guess what? The moon is your primary luminary. Most of us are born during the day because that's when people are out living, doing, going. That's when most doctors are working. We can't control these things, but most of the business of the day is done while the sun is up. It's more natural. There's more energy available. But the sun in the natal chart, it speaks to the expression of personality, how the self emanates outward toward all the life around you. And the sun is, in astrology, it's masculine or yang. And that doesn't mean that the sun is itself masculine or yang. It's just assertive. It emanates outward. Its force moves in that direction and then is received by all of the bodies in the solar system, including us. And so in your natal chart, that will speak to how you express.
Your core identity expression. And in terms of, your sun can be in any sign, depending on what time of the year you were born and all of that. But the sun also has a particular relationship with the sign of Leo.
Yes. The sun and the moon each rule one sign, and the other planets rule two. The sun has the sign of Leo because during the height of the summer, guess what is the most evident in the northern hemisphere? The sun. It is the energy of, June, July, August, right? This is very solar time. The sign of Leo is the fifth sign in the zodiac, ruled by the sun, as we said. It's our fixed fire sign. And when we think of fixed fire, well, a star is about as close as we can get to a literal embodiment of fire that doesn't move. It does emanate its heat and its light, but it is relatively constant in its location. And so all of the things that we think about the sun, we can express that or impart that personality on the sign of Leo itself. Leo is represented by the lion, and like the English expression lion heart, Leo and the sun rule the heart. So that beating heart that is electrified by essentially the only fire equivalent in the body, right? Those neural impulses, that electric magnetic energy that powers the heart. And so we tend to, we can give thanks to the sun, to that element of fire for our vitality itself.
For sure. In terms of the chakras, in the Chakras of the House series with Dr. Barnard several months ago, we fully explored each and every chakra. And the chakra that corresponds to the sun is the third eye. It's illumination. It shares the third eye with the moon. That's where they conjoin. And we'll get into that when we get to the moon. But the chakra correspondence is the illuminative third eye. In terms of a day of the week, I hope this is obvious to everybody. It's the 7 days of the week are named after the 7 visible planets and the luminaries. And so Sunday, it's definitely not a stretch, is the day of the week. In the colors, the Color in the Living Mandala podcast series, Nicole and I talked about, working with color. And when working with the sun and colors to wear on Sunday to really resonate with the sun and embody the sun, the palette is pretty broad. I mean, of course, yellows, oranges, and reds are all sun colors. But also, you can get into the dawn and the dusk colors that the sun also shares with us, the deeper violets and purples, but the paler pinks and peaches. So Sunday is a great day to wear, a full spectrum of sun colors. There is a metal correspondence with the sun, and that is the element gold. Again, not a stretch. Gold is the holy grail of the metals. It's the one that, is most valuable, remains most valuable. And spot checking the price of gold as a regular habit is a fascinating process too, I would add. So the metal correspondence is gold. One of my passions, I mentioned in the opening episode, is the runes, and there's a couple of there's really two that I think correspond most directly. There's several runes that can correspond with several of the planets, but I'm going to choose two. The first one is Jira. Jira is indicative of an annual cycle. So when you pull the Jira rune, or when you cast the Jira rune, what it's pointing to is something of a year from now, a full cycle. The other rune that I would most closely link with the sun would be Sowilu. I don't really know how to pronounce the rune names, honestly. Who knows how to pronounce? They're very old. It looks like a little lightning bolt S. It is very overtly linked with the sun and the wholeness and the life force energy of the sun. So I love this correspondence with these ancient runes. Now in the tarot deck, not a stretch here, guys, the sun, the sun card. So for those of you into the tarot, this is another way to, another piece of the prism that you can think about the sun. Now, in terms of, you're a yoga teacher, Rachel, so talk to us about a yoga pose or a yoga sequence or what have you that could, help us link up with the sun.
So the sun rules Leo. It exalts in Aries. Leo rules the heart. Aries rules the head. So the heart and the head being involved. Clearly, there is one yoga movement that is named after the sun, and those are sun salutations, in which we are moving the head and the heart up and down and really getting the blood flowing. It is what gives us energy. And in the discipline of vinyasa yoga or vini yoga, those sun salutations are what give that yoga its very active and energetic personality, right? Vinyasa yoga is very active as a practice. But for me, there is also the pose Tadasana, mountain pose, which is relatively fundamental. But it is the time when we present ourselves to the world. And the sun is about presentation, expression of the self. So in Tadasana, mountain pose, it's a strong stance, right? Both feet underneath us. The heart is forward, the spine is straight, the crown is tall. And so we have the head and the heart being presented in almost their most direct forms through Tadasana mountain pose. And so I feel like both of those things make me really feel solar.
Right. I love that. It's almost like Tadasana feels like, you at high noon.
Yes.
Just you at your high noon, most vertical self. That's lovely. And that's a great way to link up with the sun. One of the aspects that I think, it's going to unveil itself more clearly as we move through the planets. But, from the point of view of the earth, the sun rises and sets. It rises, it sets. But it also rises and sets in a slightly different place every single day. And so it's got this movement. And what it's really telling us is because the earth orbits the sun, it's really a reflection of the earth's orbit. And so, if you're like me and you're one of these science, if I could just like rewind and go back in time and just be a little nerd and in a little castle somewhere, I would definitely be one of those people that plotted, where the sun rose and set every day, and I would probably map it and draw it and think about it and ponder it. I'm fascinated by stuff like that. But so the orbit vibration from the point of view of the earth is simply a rising and a setting of the sun each and every day. Finally, wanted to end this episode, with, I don't know, I guess like an activity that you could do to really link up with the sun. If a yoga pose wasn't enough, here's another opportunity to link up with the sun. This is one of my favorite ways to work with the sun. It was mentioned in the Chakras of the House series back in the Muladhara Chakra episode. But when I worked for a midwife for many years, I worked for her about 6 years. So I assisted women having childbirth, probably personally witnessed, 300, 400, 500 births. I have no idea how many births I was present for. But it was a world that I was very much steeped in. And childbirth is traumatic and childbirth is difficult for most women. And oftentimes childbirth will do quite the number on your vagina. And our midwife would very often tell women that had a particularly difficult childbirth. Maybe they had stitches, maybe there was some sort of healing regimen that she could offer, in terms of antibiotics or creams or that kind of hygiene. But often, very, very often, as a part of the healing regimen, she would invite women to sun their perineums. And that the healing life force energy of the sun, and we're not talking sunburn territory, use your common sense, but, 3 or 4 minutes of direct sunlight on a wound of that nature is extremely healing. Now, you don't have to have had a child and been through the trauma of childbirth to enjoy the fruits of sunning your perineum. I have done it. Go somewhere private and just try it. That would be the invitation. It's quite the contrast to be exposed in a way that you're normally not exposed, where the sun typically doesn't shine, and allowing the sun's healing energy to reach a part of the body that is often dark, that is often hidden, that is often completely obscured. And it's a very healing practice. So I leave you with the invitation to go sun your perineum, if that feels right to you. All right. Anything else to add, Rachel, before we end the sun episode?
I feel like that practice embodies a lot of solar values of a little bit of courage, a little bit of deep authenticity, right? When we allow ourselves to be peeled down to our most naked and fundamental, that is the being of oneself, which is the sun.
Amen. Amen to that. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Hey there, it's me again. So I'm circling back after the episode is over to talk about where the sun shows up in daily life. So the sun manifests, right, as the self. It's the shining identity of the person, and therefore sort of the shining identity of the house and home that the person lives in. So, following the path of the sun is going to be, all of your daily rhythms. What are things that you do every day? What are those things in your routine? So this could be, brushing your teeth. This could be, any of those types of daily maintenance activities. It could be routines around feeding the pets. Be thinking about areas in your life that you address on the daily, day in and day out, the path of the sun. You can also think about things in your life that happen on an annual basis. So what are the things going on, for example, fertilizing the grass? You don't do that every day. You don't do that every month. That's not the pattern of fertilizing the grass. Typically that's done once or twice a year, right? So think of those annual cycles. The once a year pool clean out, the once a year gardening aeration that you've got to do. Think about the annual cycles, think about the daily cycles. That's where you're going to see the path of the sun most profound in your daily life. And then, of course, the shining self. That's the area of life that the sun represents. It's the shining self-identity. So, there could be a mismatch between, who your shining self is and what your living environment as a whole sort of looks like and feels like. So this is the opportunity and an effort to bring back, the qualities of the sun back to the home, the house and home, the living environment. And as we go through this planetary series, I think it's going to become more and more clear what areas of life each planet sort of addresses, represents, but then really zooming into your home where you can find evidence of that planetary influence. So here at the end of the sun episode again, looking at daily rhythms, daily routines, an overall sense of the shining identity of the house, and then what are those annual cycles that you address as, a homeowner or renter. So I hope you've enjoyed this first episode. Next time is the moon. I can give you a little teaser. That's going to be more about monthly cycles, and then the qualities of the moon as they show up in the self and in the person in different areas of life. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Living Mandala podcast. Enjoy your week.